The pinnacles of the Himalayas are the scene of dozens and hundreds of stories, tales of people who, for the most part, come here to pit their skill and their stamina against the world's highest mountains. Some of the stories end in tragedy. Some have happy endings. This story of ours is just beginning. Its main hero is called John Bem. I've always been fascinated by stories of people who got to places nobody has ever been. I always dreamed of being one of them. Visiting Nepal in 1987 and seeing the giants of the Himalayas, I yearned to see them as a bird does. John Bem and George Zitka land at the Lukla airport after a 2-hour flight from Kathmandu into the unfamiliar mountains. The objective of this expedition is not to climb to the top of Mount Everest, but rather to fly a specially modified ultralight aircraft over the peak. Well, it was pretty tight. I was flying on barely 3 cylinders. You didn't have it easier either, though. I was following you. I wanted to overtake you. I thought I was running low on fuel, and all of a sudden, there you were, going for a landing like a bulldozer. It wasn't going well for you. It was going on 3 cylinders, that's all. But now it's okay. We're here. The flight from Kathmandu to Lukla was rather risky. Back then, there wasn't any electronic navigation, like GPS, so we had to fly by a relatively inaccurate map. Fortunately, we turned off into the right canyon and made a successful landing in Lukla. Landing at Lukla isn't easy, even for local pilots, the professionals responsible for connecting this remote spot near Everest to Nepal's capital city of Kathmandu. The Czech expedition has its own wings, an ultralight specifically modified for the purpose, with a 6-blade propeller to deal with the rarefied air and an engine with a turbo blower, which John Bem spent several years developing. After preliminary tests and tune-ups, it turns out that there is a flaw in the modified engine that cannot be repaired in the field. The pilots decide to try their luck with the less powerful backup engine. Clearly, there will be no flying over Everest this time.
Okay, visibility more than 10 kilometer toward Lukla side. Overhead, light sun shining. Runway is clear, sir. Runway is clear.
At that altitude, the only planes that can land are the special Swiss-made pilotless Porter aircraft, or helicopters. It is essential to keep a close watch on wind direction and weather, which can change in the blink of an eye. Rather than Mount Everest, the objective of the mission is to complete a pioneering flight in the extreme environment of this supreme mountain range. The first impression is astonishing, magnificent. No one has ever flown an ultralight this high above the peaks of the Himalayas. The backup motor is working flawlessly, even at an altitude of 6 kilometers, almost 20,000 feet, and it seems that this engine has the capacity to push the wing even higher. With the third landing, however, it is clear that the Himalayas are not so easily humbled. With the air as thin as it is, the aircraft must land at a high velocity, up to 120 kilometers, 75 miles per hour. With the wind coming in laterally or from the rear, this is a very dangerous maneuver. The wheel was on the path. Isn't that great? We have a new wheel. Thank God it turned out this well. It turned out great, except that I'm just a little woozy. What I need to calm me down is a drop of something boozy. I was surprised when it started dancing around. I wondered if I'd done something wrong. At that moment, George Zitka was determining the future of the entire expedition. The next morning, the mountains are transformed. For several days, the mountain gods look the other way. Flying under these conditions is unthinkable, and the days left for the expedition are slipping away. At the first sign of an improvement in the weather, it is once again George Zitka who takes off. He will try to fly over the peak of a mountain called Amadablam, almost 7,000 meters, almost 4.5 miles high, not far from Everest. Airport here. Report altitude and position. Over. 6,300 meters. I'm trying to ride the updrafts beside Amadablam. 6,870 meters. Motor temperature fine. Air temp 20 degrees. I'm turning toward Amadablam. 6,950 meters, approaching the peak of Amadablam. I'm right over Amadablam. Everest is like on the palm of my hand, and still climbing. We'd flown higher than any other ultralight ever had before us. But the dream remained unfulfilled, and I was determined to return to Nepal. Stage 2 of the Himalayan adventure of John Bem and his buddies begins about 40 kilometers, 25 miles from Prague, at the former military airport in Milovice. There are tests and trials to be done of new ultralights with new engines, new flight suits to protect from the freezing air, new oxygen equipment. This next expedition to Nepal will be to the Himalayan massif Annapurna Himal and its highest peak, Annapurna 1, 8,000 meters, 5 miles high. We're at Milovice, an old deserted Russian airbase, where we've gotten permission to fly to altitudes of over 18,000 feet, something impossible anywhere else. That's why we decided to start our preparations here for our new expedition to the Himalayas. Returning from the old gang that flew in the Himalayas in 1993 is John Bem and me. Unfortunately, Paul Krijan, who was with us then, isn't with us anymore. He perished 5 years ago testing his new glider. Joining our team of pilots is Alexandra Tillinger, John Bem's sister, and Spinek Adam, who flew over the Mediterranean with us, so he isn't a complete neophyte. Get it really tight, check it out. The main thing I need to do is test this one, the oxygen, and bypassing, make sure it all works okay.
Clear.
John Bem doesn't want to leave anything to chance after the Nepal experience. Everything has to be thoroughly checked and tested. Hi, Georgie. How are your temperatures? We're at 3,500. Engine's working fine. Perfect. I'm just trying to fiddle with the prop position. Otherwise, everything is great. Temperature's in normal range. I know your exhaust temps are normal. Keep going. I'm going to have to take off when mine stops climbing. I read you. We're still climbing. Not much further for me. I'm taking off. Have a good flight. Everything's fine. Working great. I set the prop to high pitch and I'm climbing faster. All through the 80s, it was absolutely forbidden to use a camera at the Milovice airport. The largest Soviet army garrison in the Czech Republic was stationed there until mid-91. For some 20 years, the entire area of the airport had been under strict surveillance. From a secret launching site there, Russian MiGs and missiles presented a grave threat to the Western world. Today, now that military fighter planes are gone, fans of ultralight flying have moved into the hangars. The team at the Aerovodochody airplane plant uses the airspace over the former military airport at Milovice to test and break in new planes. Right now, it happens to be the light subsonic Alka 159 fighter. Nonetheless, John Bem received permission to carry out his crazy plan to make experimental flights there to an extreme altitude of 8 kilometers, 26,000 feet. While this is a common altitude for commercial and military aircraft, it is entirely prohibited for ultralights. For that matter, a pilot's ordinary normal equipment would never make it up that high anyway. Seems to be working, so we can turn it off and start dressing, okay? The toe-mounted device to measure blood oxygen is one of many crucial pieces of equipment and apparatus that ensures the safety of an ultralight pilot. Now the flight suit. A special flight suit serves to protect against the wind and temperatures that can drop as low as -50 degrees centigrade. In Fahrenheit, 58 degrees below zero.
Yeah.
Thermal liners are inserted into gloves and boots. Put it inside, all the way to the toe. And the other one is done, right? Right. Oxygen is working.
Já si vezmu až letadla, jo?
Teď to trochu stahuje ta hadice, ten zip.
Now all we need is to set the radio frequency and we can start the GPS. When you push the talk switch, then do it with your glove on. After numerous preparations and checks, everything is ready for a test flight. John will take the ultralight as high as he can. Aero 54 reports on air traffic over Milovice. One ultralight with designation Annapurna 1 climbing to level 260 will be operating on our frequency. Further reports to follow. I see you. I'll be flying past on your right. 159 greets Annapurna 1. Happy flying. I read you, thanks. To the test pilots, John Bem in his flight suit is an uncommon attraction up there in their airspace. And this is how the Czech countryside looks from an ultralight aircraft at 7,000 meters, 23,000 feet altitude. Well, you look frozen. Gentlemen, I was there. I was over Annapurna. It can be done. It's okay. If everything works, there's no reason not to make it. The only problem is the oxygen, cold oxygen. We're going to have to warm it up somehow. Everything works perfectly except that it's awfully cold. Freezes your lungs. How are you for temperatures? -46, freezing. But that won't matter. The boots are fine, you can't take your hands out too often, and, like I say, the oxygen needs heating. So, that's great. We're ready to go to Nepal. Day in and day out, our pilots will have before them this stunning panorama of mountain peaks, with its pinnacle Annapurna 1. As a challenge, as a long-pursued goal, at dawn, the mountains seem so close you could reach out and touch them. But in fact, they are some 45 kilometers, 28 miles, from Pokhara. At sunrise, every morning, commercial transport planes take off from the Pokhara airport and head off to the mountains, to remote and inaccessible airports near the villages of Jomsom and Ongre. They must make this round trip as quickly as possible. In a matter of hours, the mountaintops could be swathed in clouds, jeopardizing a safe return flight. Our pilots must subordinate their flights to the air traffic. They can only take off after the last plane has left. Our situation in Pokhara was entirely different than for our previous expedition, when we were taking off from 4,000 meters, and the difference in altitude was only about 3,000 meters.
Nyní jsme byli dole ve výšce asi 800 metrů nad mořem a vznikly nové problémy.
Now, we had new problems. We were down at 800 meters above sea level with differential of 8 kilometers to overcome, and a busy airport with commercial planes and helicopters. It isn't easy to squeeze in an ultralight craft, which flies at entirely different velocities than commercial airplanes. And it took the air traffic controllers a while to get used to it. Several cameras mounted on the aircraft allow us to follow George Zitek's first flight to the mountains. Annapurna 1 here, Annapurna 1. I'm leaving the area of the airport about 10 miles away at 12,000 feet, flying north towards Annapurna 1. From the humid subtropical heat at the Pokhara airport, he rises to the Annapurna foothills and higher, where the temperatures will drop all the way down to -40 degrees. The fertile green plain vanishes far beneath the wing, and behind a curtain of cloud waits the breathtaking panorama of the Himalaya. Annapurna 1, Annapurna 1, oxygen is okay. I've set it for 1.5 liters, climbing by 3 meters and approaching the mountains. Annapurna 1, calling the airport. I'm having trouble with the motor. Motor's starting to vibrate. I have to throttle down. Don't know what I should do. Over. Take a look at your fuel pressure. Over. As soon as I give it some gas, it starts to shake something awful. I'm turning back to the airport. With every flight, the tension that the other members of the expedition feel as they wait at the airport doesn't ease off until their friend finally lands safely. Can anybody see him yet? We can see you now. Hurry up. Make a short final. All of a sudden, the RPM dropped to 3,000, and it sputtered. I pitched, raised the prop a little, turned, tried, cut down a bit, let it bubble, but I did that when I got to 10 miles from the airport because at 12 miles, I was afraid I wouldn't be able to glide all the way in. Pilots who go on these expeditions with me are all a little daring. Sometimes they have more guts than good sense. Given the kind of pressure they fly under, they could wreck the engine, and that would mean the end of the expedition. 32 and a half? More like 35. I never saw anything like 35. Maybe you just weren't looking. So then explain how it heated up there. But the mountains don't always show their kindest face. Many times, the weather is clear and the sky cloudless, but winds gusting over 100 kilometers, 60 miles an hour, rip clouds of snow from the mountaintops. What would that kind of turbulence do to the insubstantial structure of an ultralight? In mid-October, Pokhara starts to celebrate the most significant Nepalese holiday, Badadashain. It is observed by Buddhist and Hindu alike across the land. Ceremonies, even involving the ritual sacrifice of animals, take place, even at the Pokhara airport. All vehicles, including aircraft, are consecrated with the blood of animals to ensure their safety during the entire following year. The favor of the gods was called upon for the motorized ultralights as well. The priest uses a pre-swept area to sprinkle shapes of ritual images, yantras, and distributes gifts and sacrifices. Then he calls on the gods and asks them for their continued favor. The ritual is accompanied by complex hand gestures and chanted prayers. Well, we've just undergone a ceremony where we sacrifice some blood to our machines. It is believed locally that if a machine isn't given some blood once a year, then it will take some by itself. The weather has improved, and after several test flights, the time has come for another flight to the mountains. Now, the youngest pilot of the expedition prepares for takeoff, Spinak Adam. The minor technical glitch in the engine has been taken care of. John Bem gives his usual pre-start instructions, always concerned that everything works perfectly. The first peak on the way to the Annapurna HIIGH range is Nepal's Matterhorn, the holy Mount Macha Puchare, the Nepalese word for fishtail. Because it is sacred, climbing it is absolutely forbidden. Spinak is flying towards the kingdom of eternal snow and ice. There is no cabin to obscure the fantastical view of the mountain peaks, on his right, on his left. The experience of flight, as only birds can perceive it, is perfection. He's flying where no human being has ever flown on an ultralight. Now, he is almost 7 kilometers up, and before him is the sacred Mount Macha Puchare. From this angle, its peak does indeed resemble a fish's tail. Hey, my fuel pressure's dropping. The engine isn't working right. I'm turning back. That's a problem. Try putting the boost pump on. That might help, because I did, but the motor just quit. Quit entirely. Is it quiet now? It just died, and I'm trying to glide in. Over and out. Now leave me alone to glide back in. At last report, his pumps were down, or rather, his fuel pressure had dropped so that even with the 2 pumps, no fuel was getting to the engine, and it died. That means landing without an engine, and with all the air traffic around us, landing without a motor is trouble. That's why John is listening to the control tower, to find a time gap, and we have to guide him down someplace, either in the grass, or I'm wondering if he could set down behind us by the copter, as long as it won't just be taking off. Thing is, he can't make a correction. Once he's started to land, there's no turning back, and he's committed. The bustle of traffic at the airport and the rumble of transport planes contrast sharply with the silence that prevails up where Spinac is circling, waiting for permission to land. With the failed motor behind him, he glided the 40 kilometers from the mountains to above the Pokhara airport. This emergency landing, disrupting the day-to-day rhythm of the airport, did not appeal to the otherwise tolerant air traffic control supervisor, not one little bit. For the local population, however, watching the airfield, every landing of an ultralight is a welcome diversion. All of a sudden, the RPM dropped. I tried to pitch the propeller down to see if the engine would kick in, but no way. The only place fuel may have stopped is here. Otherwise, the second pump would have done the trick. What was Annapurna like? The mountains are amazing, but flying there without an engine is kind of dumb. I was trying to make it back from the mountains, so I wouldn't have to land anywhere there, past Macha Puchare and Annapurna South. And just when I thought I was going to make it, I ran into turbulence, blowing over from the hills. Some water condensed in the fuel tanks, and a few frozen drops clogging the engine's fuel intake could have caused a catastrophe. See? 1 bubble, 2 bubbles. That's what got in the way. John is installing a valve in the fuel system which will remove any condensed water that gets into the system. The only woman pilot in the expedition to venture to the kingdom of icy peaks beyond the sacred Mount Macha Puchare is John's sister, Alexandra Tillinger. Already a crew member on her brother's first expedition, she was enthralled by flying, passed the requisite training, and now is on her way to becoming the first woman in the world to fly a motorized ultralight aircraft over Annapurna. But her flight will also have its terribly dramatic moments. This is Alexandra. I'm having problems with the oxygen here. I can't reach it. Right now, I'm hanging on the tubing, but the mouthpiece is someplace behind my shoulder, and I can't get at it. Drop down as quickly as you can until you get where the air is denser, and try to keep as close to the horizontal as you can so you don't get dizzy. Over. Okay, what exactly happened? What happened? Well, first of all, I'm glad to be on solid ground. That's one thing. I understood from what you were saying that you didn't have oxygen. I had my oxygen until the moment I lost it. I was talking on the transmitter, and when I went for the oxygen mouthpiece, it wasn't there. It had dropped out of my helmet, and I couldn't get at it. After that, I was just paying attention to the oxygen and the hose. Your nose, you need to breathe hard through your nose. I was doing all I could. The engine was set to climb, it was climbing just fine, everything was just fine, but no oxygen, so I started down. How far down did your oxygen saturation drop? Don't ask. They say you're not supposed to go below 80. Me, I was down to 64, 62. The worst moment was probably when my sister lost her oxygen at an altitude of 7 kilometers. She was communicating with us, and the tube fell out of her mouth, and somehow she couldn't reach it. Suddenly, minutes turned into hours, because I realized that if she were to pass out, and that could happen in a minute or so, it'd be the end. Fortunately, she was able to maintain the horizontal and drop to a safe altitude where there was enough oxygen for her to breathe into a sunny day. The tower gives John Bem permission for another flight. A lad from a Prague suburb, an immigrant from communist Czechoslovakia to the United States of America, a diver, a yachtsman, fishing boat captain, hydroplane pilot, and now again, a lad flying towards the realization of his great dream. At the gateway to the mountains, John does an extreme 360-degree pivot, which turns his wing almost perpendicular to the ground. The weather is ideal. The engine is functioning perfectly. He is at an altitude of 7,000 meters and still climbing, as a thrilling view of the Annapurna HIIGH massif spreads before him. This is the airport. Airport here. Can you hear me? Gentlemen, it's fantastic, but I need to breathe. Okay, don't talk till you're down a bit lower, then call in. I've just flown over Annapurna. I'm at 28,000 feet. John, you don't need to answer. Why don't we sing you a song? What will we sing him? All together now? Get ready up there for our aerial greeting. If you want to charm fair maids, choose the very best of trades. If you want a life of delight, be a hero, a soldier knight. Finally, John Bem on his ultralight is circling over Mount Annapurna, 8 kilometers, 5 miles high, to remind the world that the 20th century was also the century of daring men and women on their flying machines. Hoy ahoy, hoy ahoy, we fight for the king. Hoy ahoy, hoy ahoy, our maces we swing. Hoi ahoy, hoi ahoy, God protects us from harm. Hoi ahoy, slow-eyed girls keep us warm. Hoi ahoy, we fight for the king. Hoi ahoy, our maces we swing.
Hey!
So tell us about it. It's unreal. Except for my fingers. How was the temperature? About -32. I can't feel my fingers, but it was worth it. This hand is worse. Everything worked fine. It's just so windy up there. I decided it was better to climb to about 27 and 300. I needed to be as much as 300 meters above the peak. Otherwise, I might have gone into a spin. But the sight of it, looking down into the canyon where it drops off, absolutely unreal. How much oxygen did you use? Not sure exactly. You were scrimping on oxygen, right? Good work, brother. Not scrimping. I wonder if the photos will turn out. With those fingers, it isn't easy. Fingers like ice. GPS rose up. You couldn't see the top. And down below, there was some kind of a weird arrow, apparently pointing to Pokhara or something. I don't know. Feeling hollow, are you? I don't see a bottle anywhere. Joe went for one, but he's not back yet. It was the fulfillment of a dream I was working on for no less than 14 years. I was where nobody else had ever been. I saw the mountains the way nobody else had ever seen them. The adrenaline was coursing through my veins like never. All the pilots in the expedition flew above the 8,000-meter line. Following John Bem, the pinnacle of Annapurna HIIGH was overflown by his sister, Alexandra, as well as Zbynek Adam. Zbynek inadvertently came up with a rare trick. During his final flight, a droplet of moisture condensed and froze on his camera lens, only partly obscuring the incredible view down from the dizzying altitude of over 9 kilometers, almost 30,000 feet. The craft is now 200 meters higher than the pinnacle of Mount Everest. Members of the Annapurna HIIGH 2000 expedition chalked up a total of 40 hours in the air in the Annapurna Himal range, with a total of 30 takes. Alexandra Tillinger was the first woman in the world to overfly one of the 8,000-meter peaks. Zbynek Adam created a new unofficial record. He flew a motorized ultralight to an altitude of over 30,000 feet. The Light Aircraft Association of the Czech Republic named the pilots of the expedition Best Pilots of the Year 2000. John Bem's overflight of Annapurna HIIGH was designated Flight of the Year 2000 by the United States Ultralight Association.